Hello and welcome to another level 3 video. Today we're going to talk about the development of the steam supply system, so how it's changed from the early days to the state of art that we have today. So we first started off, we had a single feed, basically one steam supply supplying every single drying cylinder. That didn't work because the early drying cylinders were too hot. So then we tended to divide it up into 3 sections so we could control the temperature in each section. That was okay, but no one really cared about conserving steam or reusing steam. It all used to go up through the roof of the paper mill. So then we came up with a Cascade system, which was the first system that really reused steam, but that had its problems, as we'll see in a moment. And then finally we have full control of steam systems that we have today and using things like the thermal compressor. So we'll just go through these things one by one. So this was the original system. You've got the whole set of drying cylinders from the wet end right through to the reel up. We had one feed feeding all the drying cylinders. So we had the same temperature in all the drying cylinders. And what that did was, it caused a problem in the early drying cylinders. When that first drying cylinder was too hot, it could cause 3 problems. First of all, if it was way too hot, the sheet would stick to it like it had been super glued there, and it would just wrap round and around and around, so we call that a wrap up. If the cylinder was too hot but not that much too hot, then rather than the whole sheet sticking to the cylinder, little parts of the sheet would stick to the cylinder. There you would get good thermal conductivity. The water would be instantly converted into the steam would flash off and expand. It can't go through the drying cylinder, so it went through the sheet, but in doing so it stretched the sheet around the point where it was in contact. And a good example of that is something like an egg box. This is what was happening. So bits of the sheet here were sticking to the drying cylinder, and then as the steam came around, it stretched the sheet, so it gave it this 3-dimensional undulating structure that we call cockling. And if the drying cylinder was too hot but not that much too hot, then rather than individual areas of the sheet sticking to the drying cylinder, individual fibres would stick to the drying cylinder, and then the fibres would get pulled out, so we have a problem called either dusting or linting. Some mills just talk about dusting, which means all the particulate material that came out of the sheet and deposited on the drying cylinder and taken off by the doctors. Other people tend to be more specific. They refer to dusting as filler being taken out of the sheet and linting as fibre being taken out of the machine. So they realised that that was no good, and they moved along to then second generation sectioning the dry system. So now we have low temperature steam going into the wet end, medium temperature going into the intermediate section, and the best highest amount of steam, highest pressures going into the main section where we got dry. So we had a slow increase in sheet temperature. That worked very well, but as I mentioned earlier, no one was concerned with recovering or recycling steam. So all the stuff that came out of the cylinders, out of the siphon, we collected all the water and probably sent that back off to the boiler house. But all the steam just released into the air, went through the roof. And it was a good way of finding a paper mill if you were new to an area. You just look up in the sky and there's the paper mill directly beneath that big cloud of steam. Eventually we became more environmentally conscious, and we came up with the idea of the Cascade system. So what we did now was we fed steam into the drying cylinders, best quality steam. We get out through the siphons, blow through steam, which is a mixture of steam and condensate, put it through a separator. The condensate goes off the hot well and back to the boiler. The steam we put then into the second section of drying cylinders, and then exactly the same, condensate and steam, separate them, steam into the third section of drying cylinders, separate again, use the steam for space heating, down on the hot well, back to the boiler. The problem, that looked really good because they're actually reusing the steam and doing it in a very correct way. The best quality steam is here, the lower quality steam is there, the lowest quality steam is there, and so you get this increase in cylinder temperatures. The problem is you've no control of how much steam goes into here and here, because it all depends on how wet the paper is at this stage. If everything was running smoothly and you suddenly got a wet patch coming through, when the wet patch got to here, more steam than normal would condense, which means less steam would go forward to there and less steam would go forward to there, which then meant that the paper coming forward afterwards would not be dried as much, and therefore it would come in here wetter than normal, which would use up more steam, leaving less steam to go back into here. So this is known as the Cascade system. And how did we overcome that problem? We overcame that problem by using thermal compressors. So what we do now is, let's go in the opposite direction. We've got the steam supply coming in here. We take steam off going into the first section. We've got the blow through steam coming into here. But what we do is we combine it with some brand new steam so we can control exactly how much heat and therefore how much steam goes into this section. And again, the blow through steam from that will come into here, and again we blend it with brand new steam so that we can control exactly how much steam and how much heat goes into that section. Okay, so that's all we need to talk about now. So a quick summary of what we've talked about. So first of all, we had the single feed system, but we had problems with either wrap-ups or cockling or dusting, depending on just how much too hot that initial drying cylinder was. Then we had the sectioned version where we put different amounts of steam into the 3 different sections, dry sections. We moved on from there to start to recycle steam with the Cascade system, but there was no control. And finally we have full control thanks to the use of thermal compressors to combine old steam and new steam. Okay, well, thank you for listening to this 5-minute video. I think I've gone a little over this time, and we look forward to seeing you on any of this social media. Thank you very much.